The room stopped laughing before Lena Santos put down the mop. Until that moment, she had been almost invisible at the back of Harlan Auditorium, a 31-year-old Filipino janitor in a Navy custodial shirt, waiting for 200 people to leave so she could clean the polished floor before midnight. On the stage, Professor Julian Mercer stood beside a whiteboard covered with symbols. He had the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hearing his own name introduced with applause. The annual Lakeview Institute mathematics lecture had run 20 minutes late. Outside, November rain blurred the Chicago skyline and silvered the windows. Inside, graduate students crowded the aisles while donors and faculty members gathered their coats. Julian had ended with a problem from his stalled transit flow model, a dense knot of equations that had resisted his research group for 6 months. "There," he said, circling the final line. A problem with no polite answer. Someone in the front row asked whether he believed anyone in the room could solve it. Julian laughed. He was tired, relieved the lecture was over, and careless in the way people became when a room admired them. "If anyone solves that tonight, I'll marry them." The audience laughed with him. Lena did not. She was staring at the third constraint. She had noticed the error while replacing a trash liner near the side door. At first she assumed she had misread the notation from a distance. Then she counted the terms again. Julian had treated the transfer interval as fixed, but the buses in his model did not arrive in fixed intervals. The passengers changed the rhythm simply by choosing which platform looked less crowded. The problem was not a wall. It was a door hinged in the wrong place. Pi, the grey campus cat who had appointed himself Lena's companion on evening shifts, slipped through the open auditorium door and sat beside her cart. His one white paw rested on the carpet as if he too were waiting. Lena told herself to keep quiet. Her shift supervisor expected the East Wing finished by 11:30. She had learned that good work often meant leaving a room exactly as people wanted it, without requiring them to wonder who had done it. Then Julian began erasing the board. "Wait," she said. Her voice was not loud, but the microphone carried the silence after it. Julian turned. "I'm sorry?" Lena stepped away from the cart. Every head seemed to move with her. "The third constraint assumes the interval is independent of passenger choice. It isn't." A few people glanced at one another. Julian lowered the eraser. "The interval is observed," he said, "not chosen. Observed after the choice." The distinction crossed the room like a current. Julian looked back at the board. His smile remained, but it had become cautious. "Would you like to show us?" Lena looked at the wet wheels of her cart at Pi, and then at the board she had been trying not to approach for months. She walked down the aisle. Her shoes made small, plain sounds on the wooden steps. Julian handed her the marker. "Your name?" "Elena Santos." "Lena." She began without explaining herself. She removed the fixed interval, replaced it with a choice-dependent function, and redrew the network as 3 overlapping cycles. Her handwriting was compact and slightly slanted. She did not rush. Whenever Julian tried to anticipate her next line, she moved somewhere else, reducing a crowded expression until the symmetry became visible. The room changed around her. Coats remained on chairbacks, phones lowered. A graduate student named Mara Velez moved closer to the stage and opened her notebook. Lena reached the final substitution and paused. The expression did not vanish. It settled into a bounded range. That was the result Julian's team had been seeking. Their model had failed because they were trying to eliminate human choice instead of containing it. "You don't need a single optimum," Lena said. "You need a stable family of answers. The route can adjust without collapsing." No one laughed now. Julian stared at the board for so long that Lena wondered if she had embarrassed him beyond repair. Then he took one step closer, following the proof from top to bottom. His face lost its stage expression. What remained was concentration, then astonishment. "Mara," he said, "photograph every line." Mara was already doing it. Julian turned to Lena. "Where did you study?" "At the University of San Carlos in Cebu, applied mathematics." "Your doctorate was in optimization?" "I don't have a doctorate." The answer seemed to confuse him more than the proof. Lena capped the marker and placed it on the tray. "I completed 3 years," she continued. "Then my family needed me to work. When I came to the United States, the credits did not transfer cleanly. Cleaning pays on schedule. She said it without bitterness. It was a fact, and facts did not become smaller because other people had failed to imagine them. Julian glanced toward her cart. On its handle hung a grocery bag containing graph paper, a library book on network theory, and a small container of dry food for Pi. For the first time that evening, he appeared uncertain about what to say. From the aisle, someone called, "Professor, what about your promise?" Nervous laughter returned, thinner than before. Color rose in Julian's face. Lena looked at him steadily. He could turn the moment into another joke and everyone would be permitted to forget what had just happened. Instead, he faced the audience. "My promise was foolish," he said. "Her solution is not." The room quieted again. He looked back at Lena. "I owe you an apology and proper credit. I suspect I owe you much more than that, but I won't decide what it is for you." Lena appreciated the correction, though she did not yet trust the man making it. "Start by checking the proof." Julian almost smiled. "I intend to." She returned to her cart. Pi wound between her ankles, indifferent to academic history. As the audience finally began to leave, Mara hurried down the aisle and asked Lena for her email address. 2 other researchers stayed at the board, testing the substitutions. Julian did not erase a single mark. At 11:45, Lena finished the auditorium alone. The lights of downtown trembled in the rain. She wiped fingerprints from the glass doors, stacked 3 abandoned programs, and tried to convince herself that the evening had changed nothing. Then Julian appeared beside the stage, carrying a printed simulation. "It holds," he said. His voice was low, stripped of performance. "We ran 12 network conditions. It holds in all 12. Lena looked at the pages, but did not take them. "Tomorrow morning," he continued, "the dean will ask who solved this. Tell her the truth." "I will. But the truth is going to bring people to your door." Lena rested both hands on the cart. She had spent years making careful choices because she could not afford dramatic ones. Now one careless sentence from a professor and one honest line of mathematics had pushed open a door she had trained herself not to see. "Then they can knock," she said. Pi leaped onto the lowest auditorium seat. Julian looked at the cat, the clean floor, and the proof still glowing beneath the stage lights. For the first time in a long while, Lena left a room before everything had been put back exactly as it was. By 8 the next morning, a photograph of Lena at the whiteboard had crossed the campus faster than any official announcement could follow it. The image showed her in profile, custodial badge clipped at her waist, one hand resting beneath the final equation. Julian stood 3 feet away with an expression that made him look less like a famous professor and more like a student who had just discovered the lesson was larger than the textbook. The photograph had no sound, yet nearly everyone who shared it added the same sentence he had spoken. Lena saw the first message while standing in the kitchen of the apartment she shared with her Aunt Celia in Albany Park. Steam rose from a pan of garlic rice. On the windowsill, a basil plant leaned toward the pale morning light. "Your phone has been dancing for 10 minutes, Celia said. Lena turned it face down. "It can tire itself out." Celia, a practical woman with silver beginning at her temples, placed 2 eggs on a plate. She managed a neighborhood alterations shop and understood what sudden attention could do to ordinary work. "Did you solve the problem?" "Yes." "Was it difficult?" "The mathematics was easier than the room." Celia nodded as if this confirmed something she had always known. "Eat before you face the room again." At Lakeview, the security desk had received instructions to send Lena directly to Dean Rebecca Holt's office. Lena arrived in her clean uniform carrying a canvas notebook. She had expected Julian, perhaps her supervisor. Instead, 5 people waited around a polished conference table. The dean, Julian Mara, the director of facilities, and a communications officer named Elise Warren. Pi sat outside the glass wall, washing one shoulder. Dean Holt rose. "Ms. Santos, thank you for coming. I was told it was part of my shift." The facilities director cleared his throat. "This meeting is paid time." "Good," Lena said, and Mara hid a smile. On the wall screen, Lena's equations had been typed into formal notation. Julian explained that the model now stabilized across every simulation they had tested. It could improve how suburban bus lines adjusted to changing passenger demand without rewriting the entire schedule each week. The city partnership connected to the research had been in danger of delay. Her correction gave it a credible path forward. "We want to acknowledge your contribution immediately," Dean Holt said. "Professor Mercer has asked that you be listed as a co-author on the revised paper." Lena looked at Julian. "A co-author needs to review the whole paper." "Yes," he said, "and object if something is wrong." "Especially then." Elise leaned forward. "There is also considerable public interest. A short university profile could be wonderful. The janitor who solved the impossible equation—" "No," Lena said. The word was quiet enough to make everyone listen. Elise paused. "No profile? No story in which my job is used to make the mathematics look magical. I clean buildings. I also study mathematics. Neither fact is a costume." Dean Holt folded her hands. "What would feel accurate?" Lena considered the question. "Say an institute employee identified an error and contributed a solution. Say the work is being verified. If you mention my background, let me review it first." "Agreed," the dean said. Julian shifted in his chair. "And the other sentence?" Everyone knew which one. "You cannot retrieve it," Lena said. "You can decide what you do after it." He accepted that without defending himself. "Then I would like to apologize, not because the joke became public, but because I treated a serious question as a stage prop. I made the room feel as if the person who solved it would be part of the joke." Lena watched him closely. "Apology accepted. Trust takes longer." "That seems fair." The meeting moved to practical matters. Lakeview could not place her in a graduate program without evaluating her previous coursework, but Dean Holt offered a paid 6-week research appointment while the registrar reviewed her records. The appointment would not require Lena to give up her custodial position immediately. It would begin with access to the full model and a formal contribution agreement. Lena did not answer at once. For years she had protected herself from hope by calling it impractical. She worked evenings, helped Celia on Saturday mornings, mailed part of each paycheck to her parents in Cebu, and studied after midnight when her mind was clear enough. The arrangement was tiring, but it was stable. A 6-week appointment was a bridge without proof of land on the other side. "May I read the agreement before I decide?" she asked. Dean Holt slid a folder across the table. "Please do." Afterward, Julian found Lena near the service elevator. Pi trailed behind her, tail upright. The professor held 2 cups of coffee, then noticed she was carrying a thermos. "I keep making assumptions," he said. "Coffee is a mild one." He offered the 2nd cup to Mara when she passed, then walked beside Lena. "I looked up the program in Cebu. It is rigorous. It was rigorous yesterday, too." He winced. "I deserved that." "I wasn't punishing you. I'm trying to save time." They stopped beside a window overlooking the rain-dark quadrangle. Students crossed beneath umbrellas. Grounds workers were tying young trees against the wind. "Why didn't you finish?" he asked, then added quickly, "You do not have to answer." Lena watched Pi investigate a radiator. "My father's printing shop needed help after a large customer changed suppliers. There was no disaster, just many small bills arriving at once. I took more hours, then more. By the time the shop recovered, my life had moved. Later, Aunt Celia sponsored my move here, and I chose the job that let me help both households." "And you kept studying?" "People keep parts of themselves alive in different ways." Julian looked through the glass at the campus he had crossed for 11 years without entering the buildings after the lecture halls emptied. "Will you take the appointment?" "If the terms are honest." "What would make them dishonest?" "If everyone expects gratitude to replace authority. If my name is useful in a photograph, but my questions become inconvenient in the lab." He nodded slowly. "Then ask the inconvenient questions first." That afternoon, Lena sat in the library with the research agreement open beside her notebook. Pi slept on a bench below a sign that politely claimed animals were not allowed. Mara arrived with the full draft paper and a stack of simulation results. "Professor Mercer told us not to change anything until you review it," Mara said. Lena turned to the first page. Her name appeared beneath Julian's and Mara's, spelled correctly, without an asterisk or explanation. For several seconds she simply looked at it. Then she picked up a pencil. On page 2, she found a definition that was technically correct and practically useless. She drew a line beneath it. "Is something wrong?" Mara asked. "Not yet," Lena said, "but it will be if we leave this here." Outside, the photograph continued traveling. Inside, Lena began the slower work of becoming more than a story other people wanted to tell about her. Lena accepted the research appointment on 3 conditions. Her custodial hours would be reduced rather than erased. Her contribution would be judged by the same written standards as everyone else's, and every member of the research team would retain credit for work completed before she entered the room. Dean Holt approved the conditions. Julian signed them without revision. On Monday, Lena entered Applied Systems Lab 4B at 9 in the morning instead of 9 at night. The difference unsettled her. She had cleaned the room dozens of times, knew which desk drawer stuck and which window whistled during strong wind, but she had never sat at the central table while sunlight filled it. 5 researchers looked up from their laptops. Mara introduced her warmly. Owen Price, a doctoral candidate with careful hair and an even more careful calendar, offered a polite nod. Priya Nandakumar moved a pile of printouts so Lena could sit. 2 undergraduate assistants waved from the far end. Pi appeared at the window outside, his white paw pressed against the glass. "Does he attend every meeting?" Priya asked. "Only the important ones," Lena said. Julian began by displaying the revised model. "Lena's bounded choice formulation gives us stability. Our task is to determine whether the stability survives imperfect data." Owen raised his hand slightly. "Before that, we should clarify authorship. The original data architecture took a year to build." The room tightened. Julian started to answer, but Lena spoke first. "Then the paper should say so clearly." Owen looked at her. "I am not questioning the correction. You are protecting work you do not want reduced to the moment someone photographed." "I understand." His shoulders lowered. "Yes." Lena opened the draft. "Your data architecture made the error visible. Without it, I would have solved a cleaner problem that did not exist. I added a paragraph to the methods section and a contribution table at the end." Owen read the page she passed him. Some of his caution remained, but it no longer looked like rivalry. "This is accurate." "Good. Now tell me why Route 17 loses 12% of its riders every Thursday." The team worked until noon. Lena's mathematics had not come from a secret gift. It had grown through repetition, frustration, and attention to ordinary systems. In Cebu, she had helped her father schedule printing orders around power costs and delivery windows. In Chicago, she rode 2 buses to Lakeview and recorded delays in the margins of old textbooks. She noticed how people changed lines when a digital sign flickered, how a stroller slowed boarding, how rain made passengers choose shelter over the shortest path. Julian's model treated such choices as noise. Lena treated them as information. At lunch, Mara followed her to a stone bench near the engineering courtyard. Pi emerged from beneath a hedge and accepted a small portion of dry food from Lena's pocket. "You named him Pi because of mathematics?" Mara asked. "The security guard named him Pirate because of the white paw. I shortened it. He does not answer to either." Mara laughed. "I wanted to ask you something. How did you stay sharp without classes?" Lena broke a sandwich in half. "Libraries, recorded lectures, problems copied before textbooks were returned, and habit. I lose confidence after one bad seminar." "Confidence is unreliable. Habit arrives even when confidence sleeps." Through the laboratory window, Julian stood alone at the board reviewing Lena's edits. He had built his career on seeing patterns quickly. What impressed him about Lena was not speed. It was her refusal to abandon a question merely because the first elegant answer failed. That afternoon, the team tested corrupted data from the city's suburban routes. The model remained stable until the 3rd simulation, when every line on the screen bent toward the same impossible station. "There," Owen said. "The new constraint fails." Julian frowned. "Reset the baseline." Lena leaned closer. The station code was familiar. She had waited there in January, when frozen displays sent passengers toward the wrong platform. "The constraint does not fail," she said. The data labels transfers as arrivals. Owen checked the import script. The city file uses one event code for both. Then the model is being asked to learn two meanings from one word. Priya separated the events. The lines on the screen relaxed into plausible roots. Julian stared at the result. You recognized a station code from memory. I recognize places I have stood in the cold. He looked as though he wanted to apologize for another assumption, but Lena shook her head. Use it. Do not turn it into a speech. So he used it. He asked the city team for platform-level data and assigned Mara and Owen to rebuild the labels. He gave Lena control of the validation rules. The lab became quieter and more equal with each specific task. Late that evening, Lena changed into her custodial shirt and began her shortened shift in the humanities building. The work felt both familiar and newly strange. Two students recognized her and asked for a photograph. She declined kindly. A faculty member congratulated her, then left a paper cup on a windowsill despite standing beside a recycling bin. Lena placed the cup in her cart and continued. Julian found her polishing a classroom lectern. He had removed his jacket and carried a folder beneath one arm. You have been here since 9, he said. So have you. My chair is more comfortable. That is the first flawless conclusion you have reached this week. He laughed, then stopped himself. Uncertain whether laughter was still dangerous between them, Lena smiled slightly. That one was allowed. He placed the folder on the desk. Inside was a letter from the registrar. Her Philippine transcript had been received, but the evaluation would require detailed descriptions for 4 courses that had changed names since she studied them. I can call the dean, Julian said. She may be able to waive the requirement. No. It is administrative, not academic. Then I will solve it administratively. He studied her face. You do not want help? I want help finding the documents. I do not want a rule removed because my photograph embarrassed the university. The distinction landed. Julian sat in the front row while Lena finished the lectern. My colleague in international programs may know whom to contact, he said. Would an introduction be acceptable? Yes. I am learning. Slowly. Pi padded into the classroom and jumped onto the chair beside Julian. The professor held out a hand. The cat considered it, then turned his back and curled into a circle. He is also slow to trust, Lena said. Julian looked at the animal occupying the neighboring seat. Does he have written standards? Food, patience, no sudden promises. For a moment they shared the quiet of the empty classroom. Beyond the windows, trains moved like illuminated threads through the city. Lena had spent years studying in rooms after everyone else left. Now, for the first time, someone remained, not to supervise her, not to praise her, but to understand the terms on which she intended to move forward. The next morning, Julian's international program colleague located archived course descriptions in a university database in Manila. Lena printed them herself, attached her translations, and sent the complete packet to the registrar. Before pressing submit, she looked at the name on the application, Elena Marisol Santos. It was not a miracle. It was paperwork, persistence, and a door held open without being torn from its hinges. She pressed the button. 3 weeks after the lecture, Julian returned to Harlan Auditorium to correct the sentence that had made Lena famous before most people knew what she had actually done. The university had scheduled a public update on the transit project. Every seat was filled. Cameras lined the back wall where Lena's cart had stood that first night. Elise from Communications had respected Lena's conditions. The event materials described her as an applied mathematics researcher and Lakeview employee. Her custodial work appeared in her biography as part of her life, not as a trick ending. Lena waited beside Mara near the stage. She wore a dark blue suit borrowed from Celia's shop and altered until it fit as if it had always belonged to her. In her pocket was a folded page containing 3 sentences. She disliked prepared remarks, but she disliked being misquoted more. Julian walked to the microphone alone. Before we discuss the model, he said, I need to discuss the way this collaboration began. The room settled. At our last lecture, I made a careless joke about marrying whoever solved a problem. Elena Santos solved it. The amusing part of that story is supposed to be my surprise, but surprise is not evidence of her improbability. It is evidence of my incomplete attention. He did not dramatize the apology or ask the audience to forgive him. He explained Lena's contribution, named the work each research team member had completed, and stated that the revised paper would list all authors according to their roles. Then he stepped aside. Lena approached the microphone. The stage lights hid the rear seats, but she could make out the service door and the narrow strip of wall where she had stood with her mop. "The problem was never impossible," she said. "It was framed too narrowly. That happens in mathematics, and it happens in life. A title can be too narrow. A job can be too narrow. Even praise can become narrow if it turns a person into one surprising moment." She unfolded the page, then chose not to look at it. "I am grateful that my work is being evaluated. I am more grateful that the team is changing the model to include choices it once ignored. Good systems do not require people to behave like perfect numbers. They make room for people as they are." The applause began slowly and rose without prompting. Lena let it reach her, but she did not mistake it for a destination. After the presentation, the team demonstrated the new simulation. City transit planners watched routes adjust as passenger choices changed. The model recovered from delays without sending every bus toward the same crowded station. It was not flawless, but it behaved like something built for a real city rather than a clean diagram. During questions, a local reporter asked Julian whether he intended to keep his marriage promise. A month earlier, he might have answered with charm. This time he looked at Lena before speaking, not for permission to make another joke, but to make sure he did not turn her into one. "No person is a prize for solving my equation," he said, "and no promise made for applause should create an obligation for someone else." Lena took the microphone. "Professor Mercer and I agree on one thing completely." The audience laughed, but now the laughter included her rather than surrounding her. Backstage, Julian released a breath. "Thank you. For rescuing you. For making the answer better. That is the work." The evening should have felt like victory. Instead, a new problem arrived in a plain envelope. The registrar had completed its preliminary evaluation. Most of Lena's coursework would transfer, but she lacked 2 required laboratory credits and 1 advanced statistics course. If she completed them, Lakeview could admit her to a degree completion pathway the following fall. The courses met during daytime hours, when her research appointment and Celia's busiest shop schedule overlapped. Lena read the letter twice in an empty rehearsal room. The path existed, but it demanded more hours than the week contained. Celia found her there after the event, still wearing the blue suit. "You have the face you make when numbers refuse to cooperate," her aunt said. Lena handed her the letter. Celia read it and sat beside her. "We can change the shop schedule. You already work too much. So do you. That does not make it wise for both of us." Celia folded the letter along its existing crease. "When you came here, you said the cleaning job was temporary. Then temporary became responsible, and responsible became permanent. There is honor in keeping a family steady. There is also honor in letting the family steady you." Lena looked toward the dark stage. "What if I build everything around this and still fail? Then you will know more than you know now." It was not reassurance. It was something sturdier. The next day, Dean Holt offered Lena a 9-month bridge fellowship that combined research work, tuition, and the missing courses. The funding came from an existing adult learner initiative, not from publicity surrounding the lecture. Lena read every page. "There is one difficulty," the dean said. "The fellowship begins in January. You would need to leave your custodial position." Lena had expected relief. Instead, she felt the weight of keys at her belt, the rhythm of evening halls, the co-workers who had shared food and covered shifts, the dependable deposit every other Friday. Stability had a sound, and it was the click of her cartwheels on tile. "May I have until Monday?" she asked. "Of course." That weekend, Lena worked her usual shift. She cleaned the laboratory slowly. Remembering the first time she had emptied its bins, Pi followed her from floor to floor. Near midnight, she sat on the steps outside Harlan Auditorium, and the cat settled against her leg. Julian came through the rain, carrying no folder, no coffee, and no proposal. He sat one step below her. "The dean told me about the fellowship," he said. "Did she send you to persuade me?" "No, she told me not to." "You listened? Growth can be alarming." Lena smiled despite herself. They watched water gather in the courtyard fountain. Julian told her that he had once refused a teaching position because it seemed less impressive than research. Years later, teaching had become the part of his work that mattered most. "I nearly let the name of the path decide its value," he said. "And you think I am doing that with cleaning? I think you are the only person who can know." Lena looked at her hands. They had held mops, grocery bags, textbooks, remittance receipts, and a marker before a silent room. None of those things cancelled the others. On Monday, she accepted the fellowship. Her final custodial shift would be December 20th. She asked to train her replacement and keep permission to feed pie. The facilities director agreed to both. When Lena signed the fellowship papers, Julian did not congratulate her until she looked up. Then he offered his hand. "Welcome to Lakeview," he said. "I've been here for 4 years." He nodded. "Then perhaps Lakeview is finally arriving where you are." The first field test failed at 6:42 on a Wednesday morning. Lena was standing inside the City Transit Operations Center, watching colored routes move across a wall of screens, when 3 suburban lines began recommending the same transfer point. Within 90 seconds, the model that had behaved beautifully in simulation turned a manageable rush-hour delay into a digital knot. No buses followed the recommendation. The test was advisory only, and the controllers switched it off before passengers noticed. Still, the room filled with the particular silence of people who had promised careful progress and received public uncertainty instead. Julian stared at the screens. "Roll back to the previous version." Owen began collecting logs. Mara checked the platform data. A city coordinator named Denise Park folded her arms, but did not accuse anyone. "We have another test window in 2 weeks, Denise said. "If you can explain this one." Lena watched the frozen map. The transfer point was not a major station. It was a small stop beside a shopping plaza, protected from winter wind by a long glass shelter. "What is the temperature?" she asked. Denise looked at her. 23 degrees. "The model is counting shelter as route preference." Julian turned. "Shelter is not in the data set." "Exactly." Lena opened the raw passenger choice file. Riders were waiting longer at the protected stop, so the model interpreted their presence as demand for that route. It could see the crowd but not the cold. "We treated every pause as intention," she said. "Some pauses are conditions." The explanation did not repair the test, but it gave the failure edges. By noon, the team had added weather and shelter variables. Owen proposed a confidence threshold. Mara designed a flag for unexplained dwell time. Julian reassigned the next simulation rather than trying to protect the original schedule. Denise watched them work. Most teams spend the first day proving the city gave them bad data. "The data were accurate," Lena said. "Our question was incomplete." On the train back to Lakeview, exhaustion pressed against her eyes. Her fellowship had not yet begun, so she was still balancing research hours with evening cleaning. She leaned her head against the window. Julian sat across from her, holding the failed test report. "You are allowed to be disappointed," he said. "I am." "You look calm." "Calm is not the absence of disappointment. It is what keeps disappointment from driving." He closed the folder. "Who taught you that?" "My mother. She runs a household where 3 people can need the same small amount of money at once." The train crossed the river. Office towers rose through the winter haze, each window holding a different private calculation. "Lena," Julian said, "when the fellowship starts, I will supervise part of your research." I read the paperwork. "Then I should be clear about something. People keep treating my old joke as if it predicted a relationship. I do not want that story to put pressure on you or make ordinary respect look like courtship." Lena studied him. His concern was awkward but sincere. "There is no relationship," she said, "I know. And if there ever were, it could not begin while you had authority over my fellowship." He met her eyes. "Agreed." The answer came without hesitation. Something inside Lena relaxed. Not into romance, but into the possibility of trust. At Lakeview, they found Pi sitting on a stack of flattened boxes outside the facilities office. A red paper collar circled his neck. Someone had written "Temporary Campus Wellness Assistant" across it in black marker. "Who promoted you?" Lena asked. The night security guard pointed toward a group of students studying nearby. "He has office hours now." Pi stepped into Lena's arms with the solemnity of a creature accepting a title he had not earned. Julian scratched gently behind his ear. This time Pi allowed it. "Progress," Julian said. "Do not become overconfident." The revised field test occurred 13 days later, beneath a sky the color of unprinted paper. Lena arrived early enough to ride Route 42 with Denise. She watched passengers choose seats, step closer to heaters, and change platforms when a maintenance message appeared. Each ordinary decision reminded her that a model was not a machine for removing uncertainty. It was a promise to notice uncertainty honestly. At 6:42, a delay appeared on the same suburban line. The algorithm identified the sheltered stop, lowered its confidence in the crowd signal, and distributed transfers across 3 stations. No digital knot formed. Controllers reviewed the recommendations, adjusted one, and approved the rest. Denise smiled. "That is usable." It was not applause, but Lena valued it more. Back at the Institute, Dean Holt confirmed that Lena's archived course descriptions had been accepted. Her bridge fellowship was complete. In January, she would take advanced statistics and 2 laboratory modules while continuing on the transit project. If she met the published standards, she could enter the final year of the applied mathematics degree. Lena carried the letter to the empty auditorium where everything had begun. Pi followed, his paper collar already bent at one edge. On the whiteboard, another professor had left a simple diagram of intersecting circles. Julian entered through the side door. "Mara said I might find you here." Lena handed him the letter. He read it and smiled. "You solved the administrative problem. With help. That is how most real problems are solved." They stood beneath the stage lights, in nearly the same positions as the night of his challenge. Yet the space between them no longer held ridicule or astonishment. It held boundaries spoken aloud, work tested together, and respect that had survived a failure. "I owe you a better promise," Julian said. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Not about marriage. That improves it already. I promise that when your work changes the answer, I will not pretend the old answer was mine to protect. And when the next decision is about your life, I will not make it for you." Lena considered him, then the board. "That is a promise you will have to keep more than once." "I know." She uncapped a marker and drew 3 new variables beside the intersecting circles. The fellowship would require sacrifices. The transit model still had weaknesses. Her family would need a new rhythm, and Lakeview would need time to see her without the frame of a viral photograph. Nothing had been neatly resolved, but her life was no longer waiting in the back of the room. Pi jumped onto the first row and tucked his white paw beneath his chest. Julian took a seat beside him, leaving the board to Lena. She began outlining the next problem. This time no one laughed, no one made a wager, and no one asked whether she belonged there. They simply listened. On Lena's final night as a janitor, the entire mathematics department waited for her to finish cleaning. She discovered them at 10:40 in the East Corridor, standing behind a folding table covered with paper cups, rice cakes from Celia's shop neighbor, and a sheet cake decorated with an equation no one had bothered to verify. Owen held a broom like a ceremonial staff. Mara wore Pi's bent paper collar around her wrist. Even Dean Holt had remained on campus past her usual hour. Lena stopped with both hands on her cart. "There are still 3 offices upstairs." "Already done," said Vernon, the custodian who had trained her 4 years earlier. "For once, let people clean up after you." The gathering was not elegant. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The coffee was lukewarm, and Pi climbed onto the table before anyone could stop him. Yet the ordinariness made Lena's throat tighten. These were the people who knew how often the third-floor sink clogged, which professor forgot his keys, and how quietly a person could carry a difficult week through a public hallway. Vernon handed her a small wooden box. Inside lay a new set of pencils, each stamped with her full name. "You always borrowed the short ones people left behind," he said. Researchers can afford full-length pencils. Lena laughed, then covered her mouth when the laugh came close to becoming tears. Julian stood near the back, deliberately leaving the center of the farewell to her co-workers. He had brought no gift. After everyone ate, he approached with a single page, the authorship statement for the transit paper. Lena's contribution was described in precise language: choice-dependent stability framework, validation design, and field test correction. Nothing called her discovery miraculous. "You asked for accuracy," he said. "This is accurate. Then it is ready to submit." Lena signed beneath her name. The act felt more consequential than the applause in Harlan Auditorium. A public surprise could disappear in a week. A line of authorship became part of the work itself. At midnight, she returned her master keys to the facilities office. The ring looked smaller on the counter than it had felt at her waist. "You can visit," Vernon said. "I work across the courtyard." That is not the same as visiting. She promised she would. January arrived with hard snow and her first official morning as a bridge fellow. Lena entered the Applied Sciences building carrying a new laboratory coat, her old canvas notebook, and a lunch Celia had packed in a reused cookie tin. Her fellowship included a desk in Lab 4B. Someone had placed a handwritten card beside the monitor: Elena Santos, Research Fellow. Pi slept beneath the desk. "How did he get inside?" Lena asked. Mara pointed to a laminated badge hanging from his collar. "Campus Wellness Cat. Authorized areas only." Dean Holt approved a trial arrangement, she said. The library objected. The engineering students submitted 93 signatures. Pi opened one eye, already accustomed to institutional compromise. The fellowship's first challenge did not come from mathematics. Elise asked Lena to appear in a recruitment campaign titled Hidden Genius at Lakeview. The proposed photograph showed a mop leaning against a whiteboard. Lena studied the mock-up in Dean Holt's office. "No." Elise nodded, as if she had expected the answer. "What would you change?" "The whole idea. I was not hidden. I had a badge, a supervisor, tax forms, and a schedule. People saw me every day. They did not know what else I could do." Dean Holt leaned back. "What campaign would you agree to?" Lena thought about Vernon's full-length pencils and the workers who took classes without telling colleagues, because unfinished ambition felt private. Show employees where to take one course, explain transcript evaluation, list evening programs and tuition assistance. Do not ask people to become inspirational before you give them information. The dean looked at Elise. "Can we build that?" "Yes," Elise said. "It will take longer." "Useful things often do," Lena replied. Her answer became the beginning of a program called Open Doors, though she refused to let the university name it after her. Facilities staff, dining employees, security officers, and administrative assistants could meet with an academic advisor once a month during paid time. The program did not promise transformation. It promised a map. The same week, Lena began advanced statistics with 22 students, most of them nearly a decade younger. Professor Hannah Brooks distributed a diagnostic exam and told the class it would not affect their grades. Lena finished the theoretical section quickly and struggled with the software commands. When time ended, 3 cells on her screen still displayed error messages. Professor Brooks reviewed the results after class. "Your reasoning is strong," she said, "but this course moves fast. The laboratory tools may be a problem. They are a problem today. Do you want a recommendation for a slower section?" Lena looked through the window at students crossing the snowy quadrangle. She had not left one stable job to protect herself from being new at another. "No," she said, "I want the practice files." That night, she remained in the computer lab until the custodian flicked the lights twice as a closing warning. The familiar signal made her smile. She saved her work, corrected the final error, and walked into the cold with Pi trotting beside her as far as the residence hall. Julian waited near the campus gate. He had attended a faculty dinner and was heading toward the train. "First day?" he asked. "I was excellent at being a beginner." "That sounds uncomfortable." It was. They walked 1 block together. At the intersection, Julian began to offer help with the statistics software, then stopped. "Mara is better with that platform than I am. I can ask whether she has time if you want." Lena noticed the care in the sentence. An option, not an intervention. "Ask her," she said. The traffic light changed. They crossed beneath falling snow, neither of them pretending that a new path felt natural simply because it was right. At home, Celia had placed Lena's old custodial badge in a small frame beside the acceptance letter. Lena objected that it made the kitchen look like a museum. Celia replied that museums preserved evidence people were tempted to misplace. Before bed, Lena called her parents in Cebu. Her father asked about the laboratory. Her mother asked whether she had warm shoes. Neither spoke of sacrifice. They discussed the ordinary details until Lena understood that her new beginning did not erase the years before it. Those years had brought her to the door with the patience to enter. The next morning she arrived early. She placed one of Vernon's pencils beside the keyboard and wrote her first fellowship objective in the old canvas notebook. Learn without apologizing for learning. Beneath it, she added a second. Notice who else is standing at the back of the room. By the third week of classes, Lena had learned that intelligence could not protect anyone from clicking the wrong menu 18 times. The statistics laboratory required software she had never used. Her first assignment produced a beautiful graph of the wrong variable. Her second vanished when she saved it to a temporary folder. During the third, a classmate named Noah Kim glanced at her screen and quietly said, "Your filter is excluding the missing values and everything after them." Lena corrected it. "Thank you," Noah shrugged. "You helped Professor Mercer solve the transit model. I wanted to be useful at least once before graduation." "You have already been useful. Do not make usefulness a competition." They began studying together on Tuesdays. Noah understood the software and feared proofs. Lena understood proofs and distrusted buttons labeled automatically. Their differences became an efficient arrangement. Professor Brooks watched without interfering. She was exacting, not unkind. When Lena submitted a flawless analysis on the fourth assignment, Brooks wrote only one sentence beneath the grade. "Improvement is evidence, not magic." Lena copied the sentence into her notebook. At the research lab, the transit paper returned from peer review. One reviewer praised the stability framework. Another questioned whether the model's human choice variables could be measured consistently outside Chicago. A third argued that the paper relied too heavily on Lena's observations from specific routes. Owen dropped the pages on the table. "They are calling experience anecdotal because it did not arrive in a spreadsheet." "Some of it is anecdotal," Lena said. He looked surprised. "You agree with them?" "I agree that a correct observation still needs a repeatable method." Julian paced before the whiteboard. "We can defend the field notes." "Defending them is not enough," Lena said. "We should teach someone else to collect them." She proposed a simple observation protocol: weather, shelter, platform visibility, crowd movement, and the difference between waiting by choice and waiting because no better option existed. Instead of treating her familiarity with the bus system as a rare instinct, the team would turn it into a method others could test. For 2 Saturdays, researchers rode routes in 3 neighborhoods. Lena paired Owen with Vernon, who had volunteered through Open Doors and knew the early morning train connections better than anyone in the lab. Mara worked with a city dispatcher. Noah joined Lena for course credit. Pie was not permitted on the buses, a policy he protested by sitting on Lena's scarf when she tried to leave. The collected observations revealed a weakness larger than the reviewers had identified. Digital arrival signs changed passenger behavior even when the displayed time was wrong. People trusted a visible prediction longer than an empty platform. The model needed to account not only for information, but for confidence in information. "A number can be inaccurate and still influence the system," Noah said. Lena nodded. "That belongs in more than a transit paper." The revision took 12 days. Owen built the data fields, Mara tested the new variables, and Lena rewrote the core assumptions with Julian. They disagreed over one definition for an entire afternoon. "Confidence is not measurable in the way you want," Julian said. "Then stop wanting it that way. We need a value. We need a range. A false precision is still false." He leaned against the table, frustrated. A year earlier, he would have ended the argument by invoking seniority. Now he asked everyone to leave the room for 10 minutes so he and Lena could draw the competing versions side by side. When the team returned, Julian had crossed out his equation. "The range is better," he said. No one treated the concession as defeat. That, more than the crossed out line, showed how the lab had changed. The revised paper was submitted on a grey February afternoon. As the confirmation appeared on screen, Mara released a cheer. Owen opened a box of grocery store cookies. Julian looked toward Lena. "Any ceremonial promises?" she asked. "I promised to check the submission portal twice." Reasonable. Yet the old sentence had not disappeared. An invitation arrived for Julian to speak at a national mathematics conference in Seattle under the proposed title "The Professor, the Janitor, and the Impossible Problem." The organizers offered travel for Lena as well, but the description referred to her only as the unexpected solver. Julian forwarded the invitation with a note. "I am declining unless they change this." Lena called him instead of replying. "Do not decline yet," she said. "Ask them for a joint session." They built the event around the story. Then we change the story while they are listening. They proposed a workshop on overlooked variables, with Lena presenting the field protocol and Julian discussing errors caused by narrow assumptions. Mara and Owen would be credited in the research materials. The conference agreed after 3 rounds of negotiation. The night before they left, Lena practiced in an empty classroom. She spoke too quickly, lost her place, and turned every slide into a lecture. Julian sat in the back row with Pi beside him. "You are trying to prove you deserve the microphone," he said. "I do deserve it." "Then speak as if that part is settled." Lena lowered her notes. The advice irritated her because it was correct. She began again, this time opening with a photograph of a sheltered bus stop. "A model sees 27 passengers waiting here," she said. "A person standing here sees 27 different reasons." Julian did not interrupt. Pi yawned. When she finished, the silence felt steady rather than uncertain. "Better?" she asked. "Much. Because I slowed down. Because you stopped asking the room to authorize what you know." Lena closed the laptop. She was learning software, research protocol, and public speaking. But the most difficult lesson was quieter, accepting that preparation and belonging could exist at the same time, and that she did not have to complete one before claiming the other. Before leaving, she opened her presentation once more and removed a slide listing her credentials. In its place, she added a simple diagram showing a passenger, a shelter, and an unreliable sign. The work would not become stronger by making her biography defend it. In Seattle, she would let the method carry its own weight. Mara sent a late message asking whether Lena was nervous. Lena typed yes, then resisted the urge to soften it with a joke. Nervousness was information, not a command to retreat. She packed her notes, checked the forecast, and left Pi asleep beneath the projector. At the doorway, she looked back at the room. It no longer resembled a place she had entered by accident. It looked like a place from which she was ready to depart and return. The conference hotel in Seattle had 32 floors, silent elevators, and windows that turned the rainy city into a watercolor. Lena had never traveled for academic work. She packed 1 suit, 2 notebooks, Celia's emergency sewing kit, and enough food for a delay that never happened. At registration, an attendant handed her a badge reading Elena Santos, Lakeview Institute. No additional label explained why she belonged there. She stood still for a moment, before pinning it to her jacket. Julian noticed but said nothing. He had become better at recognizing which moments required witness instead of commentary. Their workshop was scheduled for 9 on Friday morning. 40 chairs had been arranged. More than 90 people arrived. Graduate students sat on the carpet while transportation researchers lined the walls. The conference organizer introduced Lena first. Her opening photograph showed the glass shelter from the failed field test. She described how an accurate count had produced a false conclusion because the model could not see cold weather. Then she taught the observation protocol. Participants compared 2 station scenes and classified pauses as choice, condition, or uncertainty. Julian followed with the mathematical framework. He did not retell the marriage joke. He referred to Santos's bounded choice correction and showed how it changed the model. During questions, he directed technical inquiries about field variables to Lena without answering first. One professor asked whether the method would work in cities without detailed passenger data. "It may work better there," Lena said. "The protocol begins with observation, not equipment. Lack of expensive data should make us more careful, not more certain." Afterward, researchers remained for an hour. A woman from Portland requested permission to test the protocol. A doctoral student from Atlanta asked Lena about returning to school after a long gap. An editor suggested a practical methods article under Lena's lead authorship. The attention felt different from the photograph at Lakeview. People were interested in what she could teach next, not only in what she had unexpectedly done once. That evening, Julian invited her to dinner with 3 colleagues. Lena hesitated. She had spent the day in professional conversation and wanted silence. She also knew declining every informal room could become another way of standing outside it. "1 hour," she said. The restaurant overlooked the harbor. No one ordered alcohol. They shared hot tea, noodles, and roasted vegetables, while ferries moved through the dark water. The conversation turned from research to first jobs. One professor had taught night school, another had begun as a city planner. Julian admitted that his first published paper contained a notation error his advisor caught one day before printing. "You never told the lab that," Lena said. "I preferred the version of my history with uninterrupted competence." It was not convincing. Everyone laughed, including Julian. When the others left, Lena and Julian walked back beneath one umbrella. Rain tapped softly against the fabric. "You were excellent today," he said. "I was prepared today. Are compliments always subject to correction?" "Only imprecise ones." At the hotel entrance, he stopped. "Then precisely, you changed how several people in that room planned to collect evidence." Lena accepted that. "Thank you." For a second, neither moved. The warmth between them had become undeniable, but so had the boundary they had named on the train. Julian stepped back first. "Good night, Lena." "Good night." The next morning brought a complication. Dean Holt called before breakfast. Lakeview's city partner wanted to expand the transit pilot to 6 routes by summer, and its communications team requested Lena as the public spokesperson. The role included community meetings, interviews, and weekly briefings, work not covered by her fellowship. "They are offering a small honorarium," the dean said. "How small?" The number was less than the university paid Julian for one conference lecture. Lena looked out at the grey harbour. "They want credibility from the person who rides the buses, but they priced the work as decoration." I had the same concern. "Then I will not accept those terms." Julian entered the lobby as she ended the call. He listened while she explained. "I can tell them I will not participate unless they correct it," he said. "No, I will tell them what the role requires and what it should pay. You can confirm the research value if they ask." He nodded. "Understood." On Monday, Lena presented a counter-proposal. The spokesperson title became Community Research Lead. The role would include authority to revise meeting materials, paid preparation time, and 2 community observers added to the model review group. Her compensation would match the university's standard rate for specialized project work. The city accepted most terms, but resisted the observers. "They will slow decisions," Denise warned during a video call. "So did the missing shelter variable," Lena replied. Denise considered this, then agreed to a 3-month trial. The first community meeting took place in a suburban library. Residents described late transfers, confusing signs, and routes that looked efficient on maps, but required long walks between exposed stops. Lena did not promise that every complaint would change the algorithm. She explained which choices the model could make, and which belonged to city planners. An older woman named Ruth pointed to a route map. "You keep calling this a transfer. In winter it feels like starting the trip again." Lena wrote the sentence exactly as spoken. Back at Lakeview, the team added walking exposure to the test criteria. The model's fastest recommendation was no longer automatically considered its best. Julian watched Lena lead the review meeting from the chair he once occupied. She invited Owen to challenge the data, asked Mara to summarize community feedback, and delayed a decision when the evidence conflicted. Afterward, he found her erasing the board. "You know facilities will do that," he said. Lena held up the eraser. "Some habits are useful. And some rooms change because you enter them." She looked at him. That was almost imprecise. Almost. "You are improving." Outside the lab, Pi waited beneath his official badge. Lena opened the door, and the cat walked in as if every boundary, once negotiated honestly, could become a passage. That night, the city coordinator sent the team its first written community report. Ruth's sentence about beginning the trip again appeared on the opening page, followed by 3 measurable recommendations. Lena forwarded the report to every observer who had attended the library meeting. She wanted them to see that listening had produced a record, not merely a polite hour. One reply arrived from a college student who took 2 buses to an evening job. He wrote that no planner had ever explained what the model could not do. The honesty made him trust what it could do. Lena saved the message in the Field Methods folder. Confidence, she was learning, did not grow from pretending a system was perfect. It grew when limits were visible and people were still invited to help. In March, Lena discovered that a full calendar could become another kind of hiding place. She attended classes in the morning, worked in the lab each afternoon, led community meetings twice a week, studied with Noah on Tuesdays, and helped Celia at the alterations shop on Saturdays. She answered emails on buses and reviewed equations while rice cooked. Whenever anyone asked whether the schedule was sustainable, she replied that it was temporary. Temporary had fooled her before. The first warning came when she arrived at the shop, carrying 3 research folders, and forgot a fitting appointment Celia had asked her to manage. The customer was patient. Celia was too patient. "Go to campus," her aunt said, taking the pinned dress from Lena's hands. "I can finish this. Your body is here. The rest of you is solving something." Lena closed the folder on the counter. "The city review is Monday, and the shop exists on Saturday." The words were not angry, but they exposed a strain both women had avoided naming. Celia had rearranged employee hours so Lena could attend classes. Lena, determined to repay the help, kept returning whenever the shop became busy. Each believed she was protecting the other. Neither had asked what protection was needed. "I do not want you carrying my choice," Lena said. "Then stop carrying mine. I chose to adjust the shop." Lena looked at the sewing machines, the racks of unfinished hems, and the lunch Celia had forgotten to eat. "You are exhausted." "Sometimes, but not because you went back to school. I was exhausted before, and I did not tell you." They sat at the cutting table and reviewed the schedule as if it were a shared equation. Celia would hire a part-time assistant, using revenue from a new uniform contract. Lena would help only on the first Saturday of each month. They wrote the arrangement down because love, like research, benefited from clear terms. The second warning arrived Monday. Lena had promised Owen a revised set of validation rules by 10. At noon, he was still waiting. She found him in Lab 4B, rebuilding the file himself. "I am sorry," she said. "I thought I sent it. You sent the old version. I will correct it now. The city meeting starts in 40 minutes. His frustration was controlled, which made it harder to dismiss. Lena had spent months insisting that every contributor's work mattered. Now her overcommitment had transferred pressure to him. Julian entered, read the room, and asked whether they needed help. Lena wanted him to rearrange the agenda, explain her workload, or use his authority to soften the error. Instead, she said, "I missed the deadline. Owen had to duplicate my work. We need to present the earlier rules today and postpone the new test." Owen looked at her. "That will delay the pilot. Less than presenting rules we have not reviewed." Julian nodded. "I will inform Denise that the delay is ours." "Mine," Lena said. "The lab submits as a team. The internal cause can still be recorded accurately." At the city meeting, Lena explained the delay in 2 sentences and offered a new date. Denise accepted it without drama. The feared collapse did not come. There was only a revised schedule and work that still needed doing. Afterward, Lena found Owen near the elevators. "You were right to be frustrated." "I was more worried than frustrated," he said. "You have been answering messages at 2 in the morning. How do you know?" "Because you answer mine." She laughed once, without humor. That is convincing evidence. Owen offered to take over the weather data review if she handled his contribution notes for the paper. It was not rescue, it was redistribution. Lena agreed. That evening she sat alone in Harlan Auditorium with every obligation written on index cards across the front row. Courses, research, community meetings, family, open doors, sleep. She had given sleep the smallest card. Pi walked across the seats, knocked the research card to the floor, and settled on sleep. Subtle, Lena told him. Julian entered carrying a stack of exams. Since he had no role in grading her coursework, they sometimes used the auditorium at the same time, separated by several rows and their own work. He saw the cards. Is this a model? A failed one. What are you optimizing? Everything. That usually means nothing has a real priority. Lena looked at him. You are not allowed to solve it for me. I remember. He sat 4 seats away. But I can ask what happens if you do less. The question frightened her more than exhaustion. Doing less had once meant sending less money home, leaving a bill unpaid or letting someone down. Even now, with a fellowship and support, her mind treated rest as a debt passed to somebody else. I do not know who I am if I am not the reliable one, she admitted. Julian placed his exams on the floor. Reliable people tell the truth about capacity. Otherwise, everyone relies on a fiction. She did not answer immediately. The next morning, Lena withdrew from one optional committee, limited community briefings to 1 per week, and asked Mara to coordinate open doors until the semester ended. None of the programs collapsed. Mara improved the appointment system. Owen completed the weather review early. Celia's new assistant reorganized the shop receipts better than either of them had. With the recovered hours, Lena finished the validation rules and slept for 7 uninterrupted hours before the next field test. The model performed well. More importantly, so did the team. At the end of March, Professor Brooks returned Lena's midterm with a grade of 94. Beneath it, she had written, "You no longer work like someone trying to outrun doubt." Lena carried the paper to the courtyard. Spring had begun as a thin softness in the wind. Pi stretched on a sun-warmed bench. For years, Lena had believed strength meant carrying every weight without changing pace. Now she understood that control could also mean setting something down before it fell. On the following Tuesday, she returned Owen's contribution notes ahead of schedule. He reviewed them, added 1 correction, and closed the file without ceremony. The small exchange pleased Lena. Repair did not always require a grand apology. Sometimes it was a deadline met, an accurate credit, and enough room for another person to finish the task without carrying yours. She began ending work at 6 twice a week. On the first evening, she felt guilty all the way home. On the second, she cooked with Celia and left her phone in another room. By the fourth, rest had stopped feeling like an absence from her life. It had become one of the conditions that allowed the rest of her life to remain stable. The email from Cebu arrived at 4:13 on a quiet April morning. Lena was reviewing passenger confidence data when she saw the sender's name, Professor Arturo Reyes, her former advisor at the University of San Carlos. They had exchanged holiday greetings and occasional notes over the years, but he had never written to her Lakeview address. His message contained 1 attachment and a question. Eleanor, is this the same stability argument you began in my seminar 12 years ago? The attachment was a scanned paper, its edges yellowed and its equations written in Lena's younger hand. She remembered the notebook immediately. In her final semester in Cebu, she had studied delivery routes for her father's printing shop. She had proposed that schedules could remain stable without a single optimal solution if customer choices were treated as bounded changes. The work was incomplete. She left school before the seminar paper could become a thesis. At the bottom of the scan, Professor Reyes had written, "Return to this when life gives you room." Lena closed her laptop. For 12 years she had remembered leaving. She had forgotten that she had also begun. She called Celia before the time difference made it too late in the Philippines. Her aunt answered from the shop. "Your father kept the box," Celia said after hearing the story. "Old notebooks, receipts, everything. Professor Reyes borrowed it when your mother told him about the Lakeview paper." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "We did not know it mattered." Lena looked at the scan. Neither did I. At the lab, she showed Julian and the team. Owen read the old argument carefully. Mara compared it with the current paper. The core intuition was clearly present, though the mathematics had changed substantially. "This affects the research history," Julian said. "The new paper should cite the seminar manuscript as unpublished work. It was never submitted anywhere," Lena said. "That does not make it non-existent." The sentence echoed her own objection to the Hidden Genius campaign. Lena had not been invisible, and neither had her earlier work. It had simply lacked a path into the record. They contacted the journal before publication and added the citation with an explanatory note. Professor Reyes sent a signed copy and asked Lakeview to return the original scan to the Cebu archive. Dean Holt's office verified the dates. The process was plain, careful, and far more moving to Lena than a dramatic revelation would have been. Then Julian found something she had missed. On the final page, young Lena had written a question about trust in public information, the same issue the Seattle field study had revealed. "You were already thinking about confidence variables," he said. "I wrote one sentence. A good sentence. Do not turn it into prophecy. I am trying to give your continuity the respect I once gave only to surprise." Lena read the sentence again. This time she did not minimize it. "Then say it began there and developed here." Precisely. The journal accepted the revised paper 5 days later. The email named all authors and requested final formatting. There was no trumpet sound, no crowded auditorium. Mara read the message aloud in Lab 4B, while Owen checked the sender twice. Julian opened a cabinet and produced a bag of the same grocery store cookies they had eaten after submission. "You planned this?" Lena asked. "I hoped with snacks available." Pi jumped onto an empty chair and received a crumb he was not supposed to have. The paper's acceptance brought another offer. A research foundation proposed funding a 2-year expansion of the transit project across 3 cities. The grant would support a permanent community systems lab at Lakeview. Julian would serve as director, and the foundation wanted Lena as its public engagement coordinator. The title sounded respectable. The job description did not. It placed her outside the mathematical research team, responsible for meetings and communication, while others designed the models. Dean Holt expected Lena to be pleased. Instead, she placed the document on the conference table. "They have separated the part of my work they can display from the part that changes equations," she said. "The coordinator role pays well," the dean said carefully. "That is not the question." Julian remained silent. The old version of him would have negotiated on Lena's behalf before asking what she wanted. The current one waited. "What role would be accurate?" Dean Holt asked. "Research fellow in community systems, with shared authority over model design and field methods. My degree pathway can remain a condition of renewal. I will do public engagement because it belongs to the research, not instead of it. The foundation might refuse. Accepting the offered title would give Lena stability, benefits, and a future at Lakeview. Challenging it risked all 3. That evening she walked home from the train rather than taking the bus. Trees along Lawrence Avenue were beginning to flower. Storefront lights reflected on wet pavement. She called her mother in Cebu and explained the choice. "Do you need the job?" her mother asked. "Yes." "Do you need that job?" Lena understood the difference. "No." "Then ask them to name the work you will actually do." The negotiation lasted a week. The foundation questioned whether someone still completing an undergraduate degree could hold design authority. Lena answered with the accepted paper, the validated field protocol, and defined review safeguards. She did not ask them to ignore credentials. She showed evidence of competence and a structure for accountability. On Friday, the revised offer arrived, research fellow and co-lead for field systems, contingent on her continued academic progress. Lena read the title once, then sent it to Professor Reyes. His reply came within minutes despite the late hour in Cebu. "Life made room," he wrote. "You did too." In Harlan Auditorium, Julian found Lena at the whiteboard, copying one equation from her old seminar paper beside its current form. 12 years separated the 2 versions. "Congratulations," he said. "Thank you. You negotiated the role I should have imagined from the beginning. You are not responsible for imagining my whole future. I know. He looked at the paired equations. I am grateful to witness it. Pi settled in the first row. The auditorium was empty, but Lena no longer needed an audience to recognize a turning point. Her unfinished past had not returned to claim her. It had returned as evidence that the path ahead was not a borrowed one. She had been walking toward it for years. Now, at last, the record showed it too. For Lena, that recognition felt quieter than applause and far more difficult to take away. The first decision Lena made as co-lead was to remove her own photograph from the grant announcement. The Foundation's draft placed her beside a bus shelter beneath the words, "From Janitor to Innovator." Julian's photograph appeared below, accompanied by his publications and academic title. Lena read the page in the new Community Systems Lab, where unopened equipment boxes lined the walls and morning light fell across a conference table still wrapped in plastic. They changed the job title, Mara said. They did not change the story. Lena closed the document. Then we give them a better one. She replaced the portraits with a map of the 3 participating cities. Beneath it, she listed every research role, including the community observers. The announcement would describe the questions the lab intended to answer, the public reporting schedule, and the limits of the current model. Her biography occupied 4 lines, the same space given to Julian, Mara, and Owen. The Foundation's communications director objected. Personal stories attract attention. Then tell the personal stories of people using the system, Lena replied. The lab exists because their decisions matter. The revised announcement attracted less dramatic coverage and more applications. Bus operators, students, planners, and neighborhood volunteers asked to join the field panels. Open Doors received inquiries from 14 Lakeview employees after the announcement mentioned that Lena had returned to school through the bridge pathway. Useful attention, she discovered, rarely arrived with the loudest headline. The lab's expansion required a new reporting structure. Julian would direct the grant, but Dean Holt assigned Professor Brooks to evaluate Lena's academic progress and approve her fellowship renewal. The separation was proposed as standard governance, not a private accommodation. Lena read the policy twice. Will Julian still review my research? As one member of the design committee, Dean Holt said, he will not grade you, set your pay, or decide whether your appointment continues. Good, the dean smiled. You sound disappointed by the absence of a problem. I am learning not to manufacture one. Summer began with heat shimmering above Chicago streets. The first expanded test connected Lakeview's model to routes in Milwaukee, Indianapolis, and Chicago's western suburbs. Each city supplied different data. Milwaukee tracked weather well, but not platform changes. Indianapolis recorded transfers without consistent walking distances. The suburban agency used newer sensors, but fewer human observations. The team could have forced every data set into one format. Lena refused. Standardization should help us compare, she said during the design meeting. It should not erase what each place knows. She divided the model into a stable mathematical core and local layers defined with each field panel. Owen worried that reviewers would call the approach inelegant. Cities are inelegant, Vernon said from the observer table. He had completed his first evening course through Open Doors and now contributed 2 paid hours a week to the lab. That is how you know people live in them. The room laughed, and Owen wrote the sentence in the margin. The first 2 cities performed well. The third produced recommendations that were technically efficient and practically absurd. The model directed riders through a shopping center because the recorded walkway was warm, covered, and short. It did not know the building doors opened an hour after the first commuter bus arrived. Lena stared at the route map. We measured the path and forgot the clock. The failure was small enough to correct before public use, but large enough to expose how quickly success could make a team confident. Lena scheduled an open review instead of repairing the variable quietly. Field observers traced every accessible indoor path and verified operating hours. The final report included the mistake. A Foundation representative questioned that choice. Do we need to publicize an issue that affected no passengers? Yes, Lena said. Transparency is easiest before anyone is harmed. That is when it becomes a habit. Julian watched from the end of the table. He did not add authority to her answer. He did not need to. That evening, they walked toward the train after everyone else left. Since Professor Brooks had become Lena's academic supervisor, the boundary between Lena and Julian had changed on paper. Neither pretended paper alone could settle everything else. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" Julian asked. Lena stopped beneath a row of trees heavy with summer leaves. He continued before she could answer. "Not a work dinner. Not tonight. And no answer is required now." She had anticipated the question for months and still felt unprepared. Affection had grown between them through corrections, restraint, shared trains, and the quiet pleasure of being understood. But Julian remained grant director, and Lena's work still intersected with his decisions, even if he no longer controlled her appointment. "I want to say yes," she said. His expression softened. "And I want to wait until the pilot report is complete. I need to know I can disagree with you in that room without wondering what the disagreement means outside it. Then we wait." There was no disappointment disguised as persuasion. He simply walked beside her again. At the station, Pi appeared from beneath a bench, having followed Vernon farther than his authorized area. Lena lifted the cat while Julian called campus security to report the escape. Pi purred as if institutional boundaries were a theory he had personally disproved. The pilot report was due 6 weeks later. Lena worked without the frantic schedule that had nearly undone her in March. She delegated city appendices, protected 2 evenings for coursework, and asked for help before deadlines became emergencies. The final document credited every field observer and recorded every correction. When the Foundation approved the next phase, no one called Lena an unexpected solver. They called her co-lead. She printed the approval and placed it beside her old custodial badge in Celia's kitchen. The 2 documents did not mark opposite lives. They marked the same woman learning to choose without apologizing for the distance she had traveled. The following morning, Lena returned to the advising room before her first meeting. A dining employee named Carlos had left a note asking whether one class could matter if he was unsure about pursuing a degree. Lena wrote beneath his question, "One class does not have to promise a whole future. It can simply teach you what the next choice feels like." She pinned the note to the advisor's board without signing it. When she entered Lab 4B, her new title had already been added beside the door. Julian was inside, shifting his books from the larger office to a smaller one so Lena could choose first. She selected the room nearest the common table, not the room with the best window. It let her hear when observers arrived and when students hesitated at the threshold. "You could close the door," Julian said. "Sometimes." "And the rest of the time?" Lena looked toward the hallway. "I want to notice who is waiting." The pilot report ended on Friday. Julian waited until Monday to ask again. He found Lena in the campus cafe, reviewing a laboratory assignment while Pi slept outside the window in a rectangle of sunlight. Julian placed no flowers on the table and made no speech. "Dinner," he said. "Saturday, away from Lakeview." Lena closed her notebook. "Yes." The simplicity startled them both. Saturday seemed unusually distant after that. During the week, they attended the same design meeting, disagreed over the order of 2 pilot tests, and revised a budget without referring to dinner. Lena had feared that saying yes would alter every professional silence between them. Instead, the meeting remained a meeting. Julian defended his recommendation with evidence, Lena rejected one assumption, and the team chose a third option proposed by Mara. Afterward, Julian asked, "Are we still having dinner?" "Did you think losing a budget argument cancelled it?" "I was testing the boundary. The boundary is not a punishment." That exchange reassured her more than any declaration could have. Their first date took place in a small Filipino restaurant on the north side that Celia recommended with suspicious enthusiasm. Julian arrived early and studied the menu as if an exam depended on it. Lena found him trying to pronounce every dish beneath his breath. "You know you can ask," she said. "I wanted to avoid making you work during dinner. Explaining pancit is not labor. Correcting my assumptions has been." The honesty settled between them without spoiling the evening. They shared noodles, vegetables, and warm bread. They spoke about books, Chicago winters, Lena's childhood near her father's printing shop, and Julian's habit of buying used records despite owning no working record player. For 2 hours, neither mentioned the transit model. When Julian walked her home, he stopped at the building entrance. "May I see you again?" "Yes. I am resisting the urge to request a schedule." "Growth can be alarming," he laughed, recognizing his own words. They dated quietly through Lena's final academic year. There were no secret meetings and no public announcement. They informed Dean Holt and Professor Brooks because their professional roles still overlapped. The university documented the existing safeguards and reassigned one remaining committee review. Lena found the procedure reassuring. A relationship worth protecting did not need ambiguity to feel romantic. Celia learned about the second date before it happened because Julian called the shop to ask whether Lena liked concerts. Celia told him that Lena liked arriving on time and not being surprised in public. He took her instead to a small afternoon performance at a neighborhood arts center and showed her the tickets 3 days in advance. "My aunt gave you instructions," Lena said when she saw them. "Detailed ones." "Did she charge a consulting fee?" "She shortened 2 sleeves while advising me." The concert was imperfect. A microphone failed. A child dropped a program during the quietest song, and rain began before they reached the train. Lena enjoyed it completely. She was discovering that happiness did not need to arrive as a reward for hardship. It could be an ordinary afternoon that asked nothing from her except presence. Their differences did not disappear. Julian planned weekends 3 weeks ahead. Lena decided on Friday, whether Sunday existed. He left books open across every surface. She closed them and marked the pages. He loved abstract arguments that wandered without destination. She asked what decision each argument would change. They also learned the gentler mathematics of one another. Julian understood that Lena sometimes needed an evening without conversation after public meetings. Lena learned that his confidence became brittle when he feared disappointing his team. They did not repair each other. They practiced telling the truth sooner. Meanwhile, Lena's final year demanded more than inspiration could provide. She took numerical analysis, completed 2 laboratory modules, and began a capstone project based on the confidence variable from her Cebu seminar paper. The project examined how riders responded when prediction signs repeatedly changed. Her hypothesis was that transparent uncertainty, showing a range rather than a false exact time, could improve decisions and trust. The first experiment contradicted her. Participants preferred exact predictions even when those predictions were less reliable. Lena stared at the results late one afternoon, convinced she had designed the study badly. Professor Brooks reviewed the protocol. "The method is sound. Then the idea is wrong. Perhaps, or incomplete." The distinction reminded Lena of the night in Harlan Auditorium. She separated participants by travel familiarity. Frequent riders used ranges well. Occasional riders found them confusing. The system needed both honest uncertainty and a clear recommendation. She revised the interface and repeated the experiment. Trust improved when the display said, for example, most likely 8 minutes, possible range 6 to 11. Precision and uncertainty did not have to be enemies. The discovery became the center of her capstone defense. In the weeks before it, Lena practiced answering questions she could not predict. Noah played an impatient transportation official. Mara acted as a skeptical researcher. Owen asked the same technical question in 4 increasingly confusing ways. Julian attended only when invited and never reviewed material the committee would judge. One evening, Lena lost patience after failing to explain a limitation clearly. "I know this," she said, closing her notebook. "Why can't I say it?" Noah pushed the notebook back toward her. "Because you are answering the question you fear they asked." The observation silenced the room. Lena tried again, listening to the actual words rather than the judgment she imagined behind them. Her answer became shorter and stronger. She wrote a new reminder beside Professor Brooks's earlier note: "Do not argue with a question that was never spoken." On the morning of the defense, Lena wore the blue suit Celia had altered for her first public presentation. Vernon gave her one of the full-length pencils, now worn to half its size. Pi waited outside the room under the supervision of 3 engineering students. Julian sat in the last row. He had no role on the committee and no notes in his hands. For 40 minutes, Lena explained the model, the failed experiment, and the revision. She did not hide the result that had disappointed her. She used it to show how the question had changed. Professor Brooks asked the final question. What is the most important limitation of your work? Lena looked at the diagram behind her. Years earlier, she might have heard the question as an invitation to prove weakness. Now she heard what it was, a request for accuracy. The model can describe how information shapes a choice, she said. It cannot decide what a person should value. Speed, warmth, cost, simplicity, and trust remain human judgments. The system should support those judgments without pretending to replace them. The committee asked her to wait outside. 5 minutes later, Professor Brooks opened the door. Passed with distinction. The hallway erupted. Mara hugged Lena. Owen handed her a printed graph wearing a paper graduation cap. Vernon applauded loudly enough to disturb the floor above. Celia called Lena's parents in Cebu on video, holding the phone so close that only her mother's eyes appeared at first. Julian waited until everyone else had spoken. "You were excellent," he said. Lena smiled. "I was prepared." Both statements can be true. This time she did not correct him. Graduation morning arrived bright and windy, with white clouds moving rapidly above Lakeview's stone buildings. Lena stood in Celia's kitchen wearing a black gown over a simple cream dress. Her parents watched through a tablet, propped between the basil plant and the framed custodial badge. It was evening in Cebu. Her father wore a pressed shirt. Her mother had invited neighbors who kept leaning into view. "Turn around," Celia instructed. Lena turned so the camera could see the hood Professor Brooks would place over her shoulders. Her father adjusted his glasses. "Your mother is crying." "You are also crying," Lena said. "The screen is unclear." No one challenged him. At the ceremony, Lena sat between Noah and another returning student from Open Doors. Vernon was completing his first certificate, not graduating yet, but he worked the aisle as an usher and saluted her with 2 fingers. Mara, Owen, and the lab team occupied a row behind Celia. Pi had been officially excluded from the auditorium and unofficially stationed with a student near the side entrance. When Elena Marisol Santos was announced, she crossed the stage without hurrying. Professor Brooks placed the hood. Dean Holt shook her hand and whispered, "Lakeview is finally catching up." Lena accepted the diploma and looked toward Celia's raised phone. 12 years had passed since she left the university in Cebu. The distance between those 2 classrooms could not be measured in credits alone. It contained night buses, short pencils, polished floors, family decisions, errors admitted, help accepted, and one equation she had refused to ignore. As she descended from the stage, Noah touched the edge of his own diploma as if confirming it was real. He had once thought his value depended on knowing every tool before anyone asked. Lena had once believed reliability meant needing nothing. Their friendship had taught them the same gentler truth from opposite directions. People could contribute and still require help. Vernon met her at the bottom step. "Your father wants a closer picture," he said, holding Celia's phone at an angle that showed mostly ceiling. Lena adjusted it. Her parents' faces filled the screen. "We saw everything," her mother said. For once, the distance between Chicago and Cebu felt small enough to cross with a voice. After the ceremony, the courtyard filled with photographs. Julian waited beneath an elm tree while Lena celebrated with her family and co-workers. He did not insert himself into every frame. When Celia finally pulled him forward, Pi escaped from the student holding him and sat directly on Julian's shoe. "He approves," Celia said. "His standards have declined," Lena replied. Julian looked offended on the cat's behalf. That afternoon, the Community Systems Lab hosted an open house. Its walls displayed route maps, community notes, and a timeline of corrections rather than portraits of individual researchers. One section showed Lena's Cebu seminar equation beside the current stability framework. Below it appeared Professor Reyes's handwritten sentence, "Return to this when life gives you room." Professor Reyes joined by video. "You did not return to the same question," he told Lena. "You allowed the question to grow with you." The new Open Doors advising room opened across the hall. Mara had expanded the program from monthly appointments to weekly sessions. Lakeview employees could explore courses, credential evaluations, and tuition support without committing to a degree. On the desk stood a cup of full-length pencils donated by Vernon. The first appointment belonged to a security officer who wanted to study environmental design but feared that beginning at 42 would look foolish. Lena did not tell him age was only a number. She showed him the course schedule, childcare resources, expected costs, and the option to begin without declaring a major. Hope became less frightening when it arrived with practical information. Before leaving, he selected one pencil from the cup. "Do I bring this back?" "Use it," Lena said. "Bring back what you learn." Later, Lena found the appointment form on Mara's desk. The officer had enrolled in a single introductory course. There was no guarantee he would continue, and the program did not count enrollment as a success until the student decided it had been useful. That restraint mattered to Lena. Open Doors was not a machine for producing inspirational outcomes. It was permission to examine a possibility without surrendering the life already being lived. She added one question to the follow-up survey. Did this course help you make a clearer choice? It allowed yes, no, and not yet. Near sunset, the crowd thinned. Julian found Lena alone in Harlan Auditorium, still wearing her gown. The board was clean. The rear door stood open to the corridor where her cart had once waited. "I thought you might come here," he said. "Everyone keeps finding me here." He joined her on the stage. "My grant director term ends tonight. The new lab charter takes effect tomorrow." Lena knew. The charter named her and Julian as equal research directors, with independent budgets and a shared oversight board. Neither controlled the other's employment. "That means," he continued, "there is no remaining professional authority between us that I can identify." "Did you ask the university attorney?" "Twice." She laughed. Very romantic. "I have a second question that may be better." Julian took a small box from his pocket, then paused before opening it. The stage, the empty seats, and the remembered laughter seemed to gather around them. Lena's expression changed. "Not because of what I said that night," he told her. "That was not a promise, it was noise, and you never owed me an ending to my mistake." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring with a small blue stone. "I'm asking because I love the way you see what systems leave out. I love that you make room without making yourself smaller. I love our dinners, our disagreements, and the life we have chosen carefully. Elena Santos, will you marry me?" Lena looked at the man who had first seen her as an interruption, then learned to listen without claiming credit for the lesson. She loved him, but the answer mattered because it belonged entirely to her. "Yes," she said. Julian's breath left him in a sound halfway between laughter and relief. "But," Lena added, "we are not announcing it with the old story." "Agreed. And no equation at the wedding. That seems unnecessarily strict." "Julian." "Agreed." He placed the ring on her finger. There was no audience, no wager, and no applause. Pi walked through the open door, jumped onto the first-row seat, and observed them with the solemn impatience of someone who had expected this conclusion long ago. Lena rested her forehead briefly against Julian's. Outside, evening light moved across the campus windows. Years before, his careless sentence had tried to make a solution into an ending. Now, there truly was no turning back, not because a promise trapped either of them, but because trust had carried them forward one honest choice at a time. The engagement lasted 11 months because Lena refused to plan a wedding during the three-city model launch. "People combine major events all the time," Julian said, while examining a calendar at Celia's shop. "People also send buses through locked shopping centers." He closed the calendar. Their families accepted the delay more easily than Julian expected. Lena's mother said a marriage should begin with 2 people capable of attending it. Celia reserved fabric but refused to cut anything until a date was certain. Professor Reyes sent a message reminding them that unfinished plans were not failed plans. Lena and Julian used the extra months to discuss the ordinary structure after the ceremony. They would keep separate offices, combine household expenses gradually, and protect one evening each week from university work. Lena would continue sending money to her parents. Julian would keep his collection of unusable records, provided it occupied one cabinet rather than every shelf. Marriage appears to involve extensive governance, he said, only when two people intend to remain two people. The laboratory's first year brought its most serious practical test. A regional agency wanted to use the model to redesign weekend service. Its proposal improved average travel time, but reduced two lightly used routes serving a public library, a community college, and several apartment blocks. The numbers looked efficient. The field panel objected. Foundation officials warned that preserving the routes might weaken the project's cost-saving claims. No one behaved dishonestly. They were responding to a fixed budget and competing needs. But the easiest version of success would favor averages over the people hidden inside them. Lena called a public workshop in the library meeting room, where Ruth had first described a winter transfer as beginning the trip again. Large route maps covered the tables. Riders placed colored markers beside the trips they could change and the ones they could not. A nursing student could study online twice a week, but needed the Saturday bus for laboratory class. An apartment manager could walk farther in good weather, but not while carrying maintenance supplies. A retired teacher used the library route for tutoring appointments that could shift by an hour. The meeting did not produce one demand. It produced flexibility the original dataset could not see. Lena's team designed a rotating service pattern with timed connections and on-request stops during low-demand hours. Owen verified the cost. Mara worked with drivers to keep the schedule understandable. Julian tested the stability limits. The revised plan saved less money than the first proposal, but protected essential trips. At the oversight meeting, a foundation member asked Lena whether she was compromising the mathematics to satisfy the community. No, she said. The community gave us better constraints. Mathematics cannot optimize a need we refuse to record. The plan was approved for a 6-month trial. Not every rider liked it. Some found the rotating pattern harder to remember. Lena's team responded with printed pocket schedules and a simple text message reminder developed by 2 students. They measured confusion as carefully as travel time. After the first month, the team removed one unnecessary variation and shifted an on-request stop by 4 minutes. The corrections did not weaken the plan, they made it usable. At a follow-up meeting, the nursing student reported reaching every Saturday laboratory on time. The retired teacher had moved 2 tutoring appointments and added a 3rd. The apartment manager still disliked the earliest route, but said the driver now waited long enough for him to secure his equipment cart. Lena recorded praise and complaint in the same column. A system deserved neither protection nor condemnation. It deserved attention. Its early results were promising, but Lena did not celebrate until the 2nd month. She had learned that a model proved itself through repetition, not a successful presentation. When weekend ridership stabilized and missed connections declined, the agency adopted the schedule for the full year. The lab's achievement attracted a national award. The ceremony organizers invited Lena and Julian to accept it together. A producer asked whether the host could introduce them with the famous marriage joke. Lena answered before Julian saw the message. No. Introduce the field observers whose information changed the weekend routes, the producer agreed. On stage, Lena stood beside Ruth, Vernon, Denise, Mara, and Owen. Julian remained at the edge of the group by choice. The award belonged to no single moment of brilliance. It belonged to a method of paying attention. Wedding planning resumed the next morning. Celia wanted flowers. Julian wanted assigned seating. Lena wanted fewer than 50 guests and food people would actually eat. Her parents planned to travel from Cebu for 2 weeks, their first visit to the United States. Her father worried about Chicago weather, despite arriving in June. Her mother requested a tour of every room Lena had ever cleaned, studied in, or argued inside. That will take 3 days, Julian said. 4, Lena corrected. They chose the Lakeview courtyard for the ceremony, not because the university owned their story, but because the campus had become a place their families and communities shared. Professor Reyes would attend by video. Dean Holt agreed to officiate. Vernon volunteered to build a small wooden stand for the rings. Pi was assigned no official duty after everyone considered the evidence. 2 weeks before the wedding, Julian arrived at Celia's shop looking troubled. His suit sleeve was half an inch too short. "This is manageable," Celia assured him. "I was told not to create emergencies." "A hem is not an emergency." Lena watched from the fitting platform while Celia marked the fabric. Domestic happiness, she realized, was not a permanent state of certainty. It was a collection of minor adjustments made without keeping score. The idea followed her home. Julian had learned to stack his open books on one side of the table. Lena had learned not to reorganize his notes while cleaning around them. When one forgot their protected evening and opened a laptop, the other asked once whether the work could wait. Sometimes it could not. Most times, the question was enough. They were not building a life without friction. They were building one in which friction did not have to become a contest. That evening, Lena and Julian reviewed their vows at her apartment. His were 3 pages long. "This is a conference paper," she said. "It has no citations. It has subsections." He reduced it to 1 page. Lena's own vows were shorter. She promised to remain curious about the person beside her, especially when familiarity tempted her to assume. She promised to tell the truth about capacity, to make decisions with him rather than for him, and to remember that love did not require either person to disappear into the other. Julian read them quietly. "You kept the important parts. So did you after editing." On the final Friday before the ceremony, Lena walked through Lakeview after sunset. The custodial crew moved from room to room. Students studied near the lab windows. Open Doors advisors met with a security officer interested in an engineering course. Pi slept beneath Lena's desk, older and slightly rounder, his white paw stretched across a stack of field reports. Vernon joined her in Harlan Auditorium and handed her the wooden ring stand. He had carved 2 intersecting paths across its surface. "Not an equation," he said. "Good. Just Rhodes meeting." Lena ran her fingers over the lines. She thought of roots, decisions, and all the times a life could change without rejecting where it had been. "That is better," she said. On the morning Lena married Julian, Pi stole one of the rings. The courtyard had been arranged with 46 chairs beneath strings of white paper lanterns. Celia was fastening a small Sampaguita pin to Lena's dress when Mara ran into the preparation room and announced that the wooden stand was empty. No one panicked. Lena had spent too many years solving real problems to surrender to a missing circle of metal. "Where is Pi?" she asked. They found him beneath the first row, tapping the ring across the stone with his white paw. Owen blocked one side. Vernon approached from the other with a container of food. Pi considered the gathering, surrendered the ring, and accepted applause he had not earned. He wanted a roll, Julian said when he heard. He wanted breakfast. The ceremony began 10 minutes late. Lena walked into the courtyard between Celia and her parents. Her mother held her arm tightly, looking from the laboratory windows to the auditorium doors as if matching each place to years of stories. Her father carried himself with quiet pride in a suit Celia had altered. On the front row, a tablet displayed Professor Reyes from Cebu already smiling. Julian waited beside Dean Holt. He looked nervous, which reassured Lena. Some moments should remain too meaningful for confidence to make easy. Dean Holt welcomed their families, friends, co-workers, students, and community partners. She mentioned neither the viral photograph nor the careless promise. She spoke about 2 people who had learned that respect was not a grand declaration, but a daily practice of seeing clearly. Julian read his shortened vows. He promised never to confuse being heard with being right. He promised to protect Lena's independence as carefully as their closeness. He promised to keep learning the difference between helping and deciding for her. Lena gave him her promises in return. When she reached the line about remaining curious, Julian smiled. "Even when you leave 7 books open on the table," she added. The guests laughed. They exchanged rings on Vernon's wooden stand. The carved paths met beneath their hands. After Dean Holt pronounced them married, the applause rose through the courtyard. This time Lena welcomed it without suspicion. No one was applauding a wager or an improbable solution. They were celebrating a choice freely made after time, work, disagreement, and care. The reception took place in the Community Systems Lab. Celia's neighbors provided Filipino food. Mara had created place cards based on bus route colors, despite Lena's ban on equations. Owen gave a short toast about the first authorship meeting and admitted that Lena had understood his fear before he did. Vernon presented the couple with a framed photograph of the empty auditorium board. "Why an empty board?" Julian asked. "Room for the next problem," Vernon said. Professor Reyes appeared on a large screen to offer his blessing. "A good life is not the answer at the bottom of a page," he said. "It is the courage to revise the question together." Lena's parents danced carefully beneath the lanterns. Julian asked Lena to join them, and she did. There was no dramatic music, only a gentle instrumental melody and the sound of people talking across tables. Pi slept on Dean Holt's empty chair until someone moved him to a cushion. Near sunset, Lena stepped into the hallway for a moment of quiet. Through the glass wall, she saw the whole imperfect arrangement. Julian listening to her father, Celia correcting a crooked lantern, Mara carrying plates, Owen explaining the model to a child who liked maps, and Vernon feeding Pi despite repeated instructions. 4 years earlier, Lena had moved through that building after hours, making rooms ready for other people's important lives. She had never been invisible. Her knowledge, hopes, and history had always been present. What changed was not her worth. What changed was her willingness to place that worth where others had to meet it, and the willingness of good people to adjust when they finally saw what they had overlooked. Julian joined her in the corridor. "Are you leaving our wedding?" he asked. "I am observing it. Any flaws in the model?" "Several. Your seating plan collapsed within 20 minutes. People appear happy. Then perhaps the system is stable without being optimal." He held out his hand. "That sounds familiar." Lena took it and they returned to the room together. 2 years later, a new student stood at the back of Harlan Auditorium after a public lecture. Her name was Abigail Cruz. She worked in campus dining and had enrolled in one mathematics course through Open Doors. When the audience began leaving, she remained near the wall, studying a graph the speaker had dismissed as an unexplained error. Lena noticed her. By then, Lena had completed a master's degree while continuing as co-director of the lab. The transit framework operated in 5 cities, each with its own community panel. Julian still taught, still left books open, and still checked before offering help. Their marriage had not ended uncertainty. It had given them a trustworthy way to move through it. Pi, now officially senior wellness cat, occupied a padded chair near the stage. Lena approached Abigail after the room emptied. "You see something in that graph?" Abigail hesitated. "It may be nothing." "Show me." Together they returned to the board. Abigail pointed to a repeating change in the lunchtime data. Lena handed her a marker and took a seat in the first row. She did not ask where Abigail had studied. She did not explain the difference between a uniform and a qualification. She did not offer a miracle, a promise, or a ready-made future. She listened. Abigail's idea was incomplete, but it was thoughtful. Lena asked questions until the pattern became clearer. When Julian arrived at the side door carrying 2 cups of tea, he remained silent. Pi opened one eye. Outside, evening settled over Chicago. Buses moved along streets shaped by thousands of choices no model could perfectly predict. Inside, one woman made room for another to be heard. Lena understood then that resilience was not merely surviving until a door opened. It was learning how to hold the door without deciding who another person must become after walking through it. Compassion was not seeing hidden greatness everywhere. It was treating every ordinary life as worthy of attention before greatness had been proved. Abigail finished her final line and turned. "What happens now?" she asked. Lena looked at the unfinished graph, at Julian waiting without interruption, and at the open auditorium door. "Now," she said, "we check the work. Fim de narrativa."